The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a soft hum, and Staff Sergeant Park Jin-ho pressed his face against the viewport. Station Velos hung in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Its petals were docking bays, and its center was a massive dome that glowed with soft blue light. This was the Galactic Combat Academy. The most famous military school in the known universe. Jin-ho was not a big man. He stood at 5 feet 9 inches, which was average for a human but small compared to most alien species. He had no claws, no armored skin, no extra limbs. His eyes could not see in the dark. His ears could not hear ultrasonic sounds. By galactic standards, humans were soft, slow, and fragile. But Jin-ho was a Marine, and Marines did not care about standards. The transport docked with a gentle bump. Jin-ho grabbed his bag and walked down the ramp into the station. The air smelled strange, like copper and flowers mixed together. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs. Some walked on 4. Some floated. One species seemed to roll like a wheel. A tall creature with blue scales and yellow eyes looked down at Jin-ho as he passed. The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Human," it said to its companion. "Look how small. Look how soft. Why did they send this one?" Jin-ho kept walking. He had heard worse. The academy had accepted its first human students this year. It was part of a new alliance between Earth and the Galactic Council. Humans had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. Most species had been doing it for thousands. The Council wanted to see what humans could do. They wanted to understand this strange new species that had spread. So quickly across the galaxy, Jin-ho found his assigned quarters. The room was small, but clean. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out at the stars. He put his bag on the bed and took out a small data chip. He held it in his palm for a moment, feeling its weight. Then he put it in his pocket. The first class was in 1 hour. The lecture hall was enormous. It could hold 500 students, and today it was almost full. Jin-ho walked in and felt hundreds of eyes turned toward him. He was the only human in the room. He found a seat in the back row. The chair was too big for him, designed for species with larger bodies. He sat on the edge and waited. The alien next to him was a Torvan named Rail. Torvani were reptilian, with green scales and long tails. Rail looked at Jin-ho with an expression that mixed curiosity with pity. "You are the human," Rail said. It was not a question. "I am," said Jin-ho. "I have read about your species. You come from a death world. Your planet has extreme temperatures, natural disasters, and predators. Yet you have no natural defenses. No venom, no armor, no regeneration." Rail tilted his head. "How did your kind survive?" Jin-ho thought about this question. He had been asked it many times since leaving Earth. "You're stubborn," he said finally. Rail made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh. "Stubbornness does not stop a predator's teeth." "No," Jin-ho agreed. "But it helps you get back up after the predator bites you." Before Rail could respond, the doors at the front of the hall opened. The room went silent. Commander Thane walked in. Thane was a Valori. His species was known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors. He stood 8 feet tall and had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle. His skin was dark gray, like stone, and his 4 eyes glowed with soft orange light. He had fought in over 200 battles. He had never lost. "Welcome," Thane said. His voice was deep and powerful. It filled the room without effort. "You are here because your worlds believe you are warriors. You are here because you wish to learn the art of combat at the highest level." He walked slowly across the front of the hall, his 4 eyes scanning the students. "I will teach you strategy. I will teach you tactics. I will teach you how to think like a soldier. But first, I must teach you the most important lesson of all." He stopped and faced the class. "Proportional response." The words appeared on the holographic display behind him. "This is foundation of civilized warfare," Thane continued. "You use only the force necessary to achieve your objective. No more, no less. This conserves resources. This prevents unnecessary destruction. This separates warriors from barbarians." Jin-ho listened carefully. He understood the concept. It made sense from a logical perspective. It's the opposite of proportional response, Thane said, is overkill. Overkill is wasteful. Overkill is primitive. Overkill is the mark of a species that lacks precision and discipline. He paused and looked around the room. Today I want examples. I want to understand how different species view this concept. Can anyone describe an instance of overkill from their world's history? Several hands went up. A Selvari cadet named Kos spoke about a battle where his people used 10 ships to destroy one enemy vessel. Thane nodded but seemed unimpressed. A floating species called the Mockery described using poison gas on a single enemy base. Thane called it inefficient. Then Ginho raised his hand. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to the human in the back row, Commander Thane's. 4 eyes focused on him. Sergeant Park, you have something to share? Ginho stood up slowly. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. Yes, Commander. I can show you an example of human overkill. Kos laughed loudly. The soft skin wants to impress us. What will you show, human? Did your people once use 2 rocks instead of 1? Other students laughed. Ginho did not react. Commander Thane raised a hand for silence. Let him speak. He looked at Ginho with something that might have been curiosity. Very well, Sergeant. Show us your example. One example. Ginho reached into his pocket and pulled out the data chip. Commander, he said, you asked for one example, but to understand it, you need to see what happened. I brought footage. He walked toward the front of the hall. The laughter slowly died away. Ginho walked down the steps toward the front of the lecture hall. The room was completely silent now. Every alien in the hall watched him move. Their eyes followed his small form as he approached the holographic display system. Commander Thane stood to the side. His forearms crossed over his massive chest. His orange eyes studied the human with new interest. In all his years of teaching, no human had ever stood at this podium. Ginho inserted the data chip into the display port. The system hummed softly as it read the information. Before I show you the footage, Ginho said, turning to face the class, I need to give you some context. Without context, you will not understand what you are seeing. Kos, the Selvari cadet who had mocked him, leaned forward in his seat. His silver scales caught the light as he moved. Context. What context does a human need to show us overkill? Did someone step on your flower garden? Some students laughed, but the sound was nervous now. There was something in the human's eyes that made them uncomfortable. He did not look angry. He did not look upset. He looked calm. Too calm. In the year 2847 by Earth's calendar, Ginho began, ignoring the laughter. A species called the Krell attacked a human colony on a moon called Titan 7. The name Krell made several students shift in their seats. The Krell were known throughout the galaxy. They were massive creatures, standing 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could cut through steel. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They were feared by many species. The colony had a population of 12,000 people, Ginho continued. Farmers, scientists, families, children. They had no military presence. They were not a threat to anyone. He pressed a button. And the holographic display showed an image of Titan 7. It was a small moon with orange skies and rocky terrain. The colony was a cluster of domes and buildings near a large lake. The Krell sent a raiding party. 60 warriors. They came without warning in the middle of the night. They broke through the colony's outer walls and began killing everyone they found. The display changed to show security camera footage. It was dark and grainy, but the shapes were clear. Massive Krell warriors moved through the streets, their claws red with blood. People ran. People screamed. People fell. Rail, the Torvan cadet, looked away from the screen. His green scales had turned pale. By the time the colony's emergency signal reached the nearest military base, Ginho said, 400 people were dead. Men, women, children. The Krell did not care. They killed without reason, without purpose, just because they could. Commander Thane watched the footage with a steady gaze. His species had seen much violence in their history, but even he seemed uncomfortable. The nearest military base was the home of the 3rd Orbital Response Unit, Jinho continued. A marine company. When they received the signal, they mobilized immediately. How many Marines? Asked a cadet from the middle of the room. The initial response team was 12. Koss laughed again, but this time the sound was hollow. 12. Against 60 Krell. That is not overkill. That is suicide, said initial response, Jinho replied. His voice was still calm, still steady. Let me show you what happened next. He pressed another button, and the display changed. Now it showed helmet camera footage from a Marine's perspective. The view shook as the camera's owner fell through the orange atmosphere of Titan 7 inside a drop pod. This footage comes from Lieutenant Yuna Ginho explained. She was the squad leader. What you are about to see is the unedited recording of the response to the Titan 7 massacre. Radio chatter filled the lecture hall. The voices were human, speaking quickly and efficiently. All units, this is Lieutenant Yuna, confirmed drop positions. Sergeant Taiwu confirmed. East Quadrant. Corporal Hannah confirmed. South Quadrant. Orbital beacons ready. Private Doyan confirmed. Heavy weapons hot. Pod hit the ground with a heavy thud. The camera view steadied as Lieutenant Yuna climbed out. Around her, 11 other Marines emerged from their pods. They moved with speed and precision. Sergeant Taiwu Yuna's voice said, status on enemy numbers. Confirmed 60+ hostiles, Lieutenant. They are dug in around the water treatment facility. They have taken defensive positions. Copy that. All units, weapons free on arrival. No survivors. The footage showed the Marines moving toward the colony. They did not sneak. They did not hide. They walked straight toward the enemy. Koss was no longer laughing. What are they doing? 12 soldiers walking directly at 60 Krell? The Krell will tear them apart. Keep watching, said Jinho. On the screen, Corporal Hannah stopped and planted 3 small devices in the ground. They glowed with blue light. Orbital strike beacons deployed, her voice said over the radio. Painting the target now. The students in the lecture hall looked confused. Rail leaned over to the cadet beside him. What is an orbital strike beacon? Before anyone could answer, Private Doyan raised a massive launcher onto his shoulder. The weapon was almost as big as he was. Cluster munitions loaded, he reported. Ready to fire on your command, Lieutenant? Hold for my signal, Yuna replied. The Marines reached the edge of the colony. Ahead of them, the Krell warriors waited behind barricades they had built from broken walls and vehicles. Their dark eyes watched the approaching humans. One of the Krell stood up and roared. It was a challenge, threat. In their culture, such a display was meant to scare enemies into retreat. Lieutenant Yuna did not stop walking. All units, she said calmly. Fire at will. What happened next made the entire lecture hall go silent. Dojan fired his launcher. The cluster munitions streaked through the air and exploded over the Krell position, sending hundreds of smaller bombs raining down. Explosions tore through the barricades. At the same time, Hannah's orbital beacons activated. From somewhere high above the atmosphere, bright beams of light shot down from the sky. They hit the water treatment facility with the force of small meteors. And that was only the beginning. Commander Thane stepped forward, his 4 eyes wide. What is that? He pointed at the sky in the footage. 3 shapes were descending through the clouds. Ships. Large ships. Those are gunships, Ginho said. Close air support. Lieutenant Yuna called them in before her squad even reached the ground. The gunships opened fire. Rockets, cannons, more explosions. This is insane, Rail whispered. This is completely insane. Jinho turned to face the class. His expression had not changed. Commander Thane, he said, you asked for one example of human overkill. This footage runs for 3 more hours. Would you like me to continue? The lecture hall was silent. Commander Thane did not answer immediately. He stared at the frozen image on the holographic display. The water treatment facility was gone. In its place was a crater filled with smoke and fire. The 3 gunships hung in the orange sky like metal birds of prey. Continue, Thane said finally. His voice was quieter than before. Jinho pressed the button. The footage resumed. The dust began to settle on the screen. Where 60 Krell warriors had stood, there was nothing. No bodies, no survivors. The orbital strikes and cluster munitions had erased them completely. But the Marines did not stop. Sergeant Taiwu, Lieutenant Yuna's voice said through the radio. Confirm enemy status. All hostiles eliminated, Lieutenant. 0 survivors in the immediate area. Copy. Begin search pattern. Check every building. Every corner. If anything moves, and it is not human, put it down. The footage showed the 12 Marines spreading out through the ruined colony. They moved from building to building, kicking down doors, clearing rooms. Their weapons never lowered. Koss stood up in his seat. His silver scales had lost their shine. Wait, the enemy is already dead. Why are they still searching? What are they looking for? They are making sure, Jinho replied. Humans do not assume. We confirm. On the screen, Corporal Hannah found a Krell survivor. The creature was badly injured, missing one arm and bleeding from multiple wounds. It tried to crawl away from her. Hannah did not hesitate. She raised her weapon and fired 3 times. The Krell stopped moving. Hostile neutralized, her voice reported calmly. Several students in the lecture hall made sounds of shock. In their cultures, wounded enemies were often taken prisoner. They were treated with respect. They were given medical care. Not here. You killed a wounded enemy, Rail said. His voice shook slightly. That is against the rules of war. That is, the Krell did not follow rules of war when they killed our children, Ginho interrupted. His voice was still calm, but there was something cold in it now. They showed no mercy. They received none in return. The footage continued. For the next 30 minutes, the Marines searched the colony. They found 4 more Krell survivors. Each one was killed without hesitation. Then Lieutenant Yuna received a new transmission. Lieutenant, this is command. Secondary response is inbound. 8 to 15 minutes. Copy that command. Primary objective complete. Awaiting secondary. Koss shook his head. Secondary response? The enemy is dead. Why would they send more forces? Watch, said Jinho. The footage jumped forward in time. The orange sky of Titan 7 darkened as dozens of new ships appeared. Transport ships, gunships, heavy assault carriers. They descended through the atmosphere like a swarm of insects. The holographic display showed a wider view now. It came from a surveillance drone flying high above the colony. On the ground, hundreds of new Marines poured out of the transport ships. Armored vehicles rolled across the rocky terrain. Combat robots marched in perfect formation. Commander Thane stepped closer to the display. His 4 eyes scanned the numbers in the corner of the screen. 247 personnel, he read aloud. 46 aircraft. 18 armored vehicles. 12 combat automations. He turned to Jinho. You deployed this force after the enemy was already eliminated? Yes, Commander. Why? Ginho did not answer immediately. Instead, he advanced the footage again. Now the display showed the inside of a command ship. A man stood at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic screens and military officers. He wore the uniform of a colonel. His face was hard and weathered, the face of a man who had seen many battles. This is Colonel Wusung, Ginho explained, commander of the Titan Sector Defense Force. When he received word of the attack, he mobilized every unit under his command. On the screen, Colonel Wusung addressed his officers. Our mission is not just elimination, he said. Every Krell on that moon is already dead. Our mission now is something more important. It is a message. He pointed at a map of Titan 7. We will secure every meter of this colony. We will recover every human body. We will document everything. And then we will make sure that every species in this galaxy sees what happens when you attack human civilians. One of his officers spoke up. Sir, this is a significant deployment. Command may question the resource expenditure. Colonel Wusung looked at the officer with cold eyes. 400 of our people are dead. Men, women, children. When the Krell see what we have done here, they will think twice before attacking us again. When other species see this response, they will know that humans do not forgive. We do not forget, and we do not hold back. The footage returned to the surface of Titan 7. The Marines had set up a full base of operations. Medical teams recovered human bodies with care and respect. Combat engineers rebuilt defensive walls. Scout teams patrolled the surrounding area in vehicles and aircraft. All of this for 60 dead Krell. This still makes no sense, Koss said. He was standing now, his claws gripping the seat in front of him. You won the battle with 12 soldiers. Why spend so many resources on a victory you already have? Ginho turned off the display. The lecture hall fell into shadow, because victory was not the goal, he said quietly. The goal was fear. He let the word hang in the air. Krell thought humans were weak, soft, easy targets. They attacked our colony, expecting no real response. They expected us to cry and hide and beg for peace. He looked around the room at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. Instead, we sent 12 Marines who destroyed them with orbital fire and cluster munitions. Then, we sent 200 more Marines to occupy the battlefield. But we were not finished. Commander Thane's orange eyes narrowed. There is more? Jinho nodded slowly. Commander, I told you this was an example of human overkill. What I have shown you so far is only the first response. There was a second. And a third. The room was completely silent. 3 days after the attack, Jinho continued, the 7th Fleet was rerouted from the Andromeda border. 18 capital ships. 42 support vessels. 15,000 personnel. 15,000. Rael's voice was barely a whisper. For 60 Krell raiders who were already dead. The fleet did not come to Titan 7. They went to Krell space. They positioned themselves at the border. And they waited. Waited for what? Asked Commander Thane. Ginho looked at him with steady eyes. For the Krell to make a decision. Return our dead and apologize. Or face the consequences. The lecture hall remained silent. Every alien in the room was trying to understand what they had, used herd. 60 raiders had killed 400 humans. In response, the humans had deployed thousands of soldiers, dozens of ships, and positioned an entire fleet at the enemy's border. It was insane. It was wasteful. It was completely irrational. And yet, somehow, it was terrifying. The silence in the lecture hall lasted for a long time. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Commander Thane was the first to break the silence. He walked slowly toward Jinho, his massive form casting a shadow over the human. His forearms hung at his sides. His orange eyes studied the Marine with an expression that mixed confusion with something else. Something that might have been respect. Sergeant Park, Thane said slowly. I have been a warrior for 140 years. I have fought in 216 battles. I have taught military strategy to species from 17 star systems. He stopped directly in front of Jinho. I have never heard of a response like this. Jinho looked up at the towering alien without fear. That is because most species think about war differently than humans do. Commander, explain. Jinho turned to face the class again. Every eye in the room was on him. Cadets who had laughed at him an hour ago now watched him with careful attention. Most species in this galaxy fight wars for logical reasons, Ginho began. Territory, resources, strategic advantage. You calculate the cost of a battle against the benefit. You use exactly the force needed to achieve your goal. No more, no less. He paused. This is efficient. This is rational. This is how advanced civilizations wage war. Koss nodded slowly. That is correct. That is how all civilized species behave. Wasting resources on a defeated enemy is foolish. From your perspective, yes, Ginho agreed. But humans do not see it that way. We do not fight wars only to win. We fight wars to make sure we never have to fight them again. Rael leaned forward in his seat. I do not understand. How does destroying your own water treatment facility prevent future wars? It sends a message, Jinho replied. It tells everyone who is watching that attacking humans has consequences they cannot predict. We do not respond proportionally. We respond with everything we have. Our enemies see this, and they calculate, is it worth it? Is attacking these humans worth the destruction we will face in return? He looked around the room. Usually the answer is no. Commander Thane crossed his upper arms over his chest, but this is inefficient. You spend resources you do not need to spend. You destroy infrastructure you need to rebuild. From a purely military perspective, it makes no sense. From a purely military perspective, you are correct, Ginho said. But humans do not think purely about military. We think about psychology, fear, reputation. The battles we fight today affect the wars of tomorrow. He walked back to the holographic display and turned it on again. The image showed the 7th Fleet, 18 massive warships hanging in space near the Krell border. When the Krell saw this fleet, Ginho said they had to make a choice. They could fight, and maybe they would win. The Krell are strong. They have many ships. But even if they won, how many of their people would die? How many of their worlds would burn? The display changed to show a recording from the Krell border. A small Krell ship approached the human fleet. It carried no weapons. It flew slowly, carefully, where Ginho continued. They could give us what we wanted. Return our dead. Promise to never attack human space again. And the fleet would leave. What did they choose? Asked a cadet from the front row. Ginho paused the footage. They returned every human body within 72 hours. Every single one. They sent a formal apology to the Earth Council. They agreed to pay compensation to the families of the dead. He turned off the display. They have never crossed into human space since. The lecture hall erupted into whispered conversations. Cadets turned to each other, speaking in a dozen different languages. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared at the human with new eyes. Koss stood up slowly. His earlier mockery was gone. Now he looked troubled. Sergeant Park, he said, what you are describing is not warfare. It is terrorism. You are using fear as a weapon. Ginho considered the question carefully. Yes, he said finally. We are. The simple admission seemed to shock the room more than anything else. Koss sat back down heavily. Humans call it deterrence, Ginho continued. We learned it long before we reached the stars. On our world, we had weapons that could destroy entire cities, entire nations. We built these weapons not to use them, but to make sure others would never attack us. The threat of destruction kept the peace. Commander Thane made a low sound. Mutual assured destruction. I have read about this concept in human history files. I thought it was exaggeration. It was not, said Ginho. For almost a century, human nations pointed weapons at each other that could end all life on our planet. And because everyone knew what would happen if those weapons were used, nobody used them. That is insane, Rail said. You held your own extinction as a bargaining chip? Yes, and it worked. Thane walked slowly back to the front of the hall. He stood beside Ginho, looking out at his students. I taught you. That proportional response is the mark of a civilized warrior, he said. I have taught you that overkill is wasteful and primitive. He paused. Perhaps I was wrong. The students shifted in their seats. This was not something they expected to hear from the legendary Commander Thane. The human approach is different, Thane continued. It is not elegant. It is not efficient. But looking at the results, he glanced at Ginho. It appears to be effective. Ginho nodded slowly. Commander, humans have been spacefaring for only 300 years. In that time, we have been attacked by 4 different species. The Krell were the first. After them, there were 3 others who thought we were weak targets. And what happened to them? They learned the same lesson the Krell did. Attack humans, and you will face consequences beyond anything you imagined. Not because we are strong, not because we have better weapons, but because we are willing to spend everything we have to make sure the attack is never repeated. He looked at the cadets in the lecture hall. We do not have natural armor like the Selvair. We do not have 4 arms like the Valori. We cannot regenerate like the Torvani. Nature did not give us weapons. He tapped the side of his head. So we built our own. And we learned that sometimes the best weapon is not a gun or a bomb. It is fear. Fear of what we will do if you make us angry. Fear of how far we will go. Fear of our willingness to burn everything, including ourselves, if it means you burn with us." The room was silent again. "You call it overkill," Jinho said quietly. "We call it insurance. We call it making sure this never happens again. We call it protecting the next colony that might be attacked. The next family that might be killed." He turned to Commander Thane. 400 people died on Titan 7. That number has not increased in the 30 years since. The Krell have not attacked us again. Neither have any of the other species who tried. He paused. "From my perspective, the resources we spent were worth every credit." Commander Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Class dismissed," he said. "Early. I need time to think about what I have learned today." The cadets began to file out of the lecture hall. Many of them looked at Jinho as they passed. Their expressions had changed. The pity was gone. The amusement was gone. Now there was something else in there. Eyes, respect, and perhaps a little fear. The lecture hall slowly emptied. Cadets walked past Jinho in silence, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Some looked at him directly. Others avoided his eyes. But none of them spoke. Rail, the Torvan cadet, stopped at the door. He turned back to look at the human still standing at the front of the room. For a moment, he seemed like he wanted to say something. Then he simply nodded once and left soon. Only Jinho and Commander Thane remained. The massive Vellery stood near the holographic display, his forearms clasped behind his back. His orange eyes stared at something far away, something only he could see. He did not move for a long time. Jinho waited patiently. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the most powerful form of communication. Finally, Thane spoke. "Sergeant Park, your species has only been traveling among the stars for 3 centuries. You have no natural weapons, no enhanced physiology, no hive mind coordination. You are smaller than most species, weaker than most species. By every standard measurement, you should not have survived first contact with the galaxy." Jinho said nothing. And yet Thane continued. "In 300 years, you have established colonies on 400 worlds. You have defeated 4 hostile species. You have earned a seat on the Galactic Council faster than any species in recorded history." He turned to face the human. "How?" Jinho considered the question carefully. It was the same question Rail had asked him earlier, but now it felt different. Now it felt important. "Commander, do you know what life was like on Earth before we reached the stars?" Thane shook his head slowly. "Our planet tried to kill us from the moment we were born," Jinho said. "Ice ages covered our lands in frozen death. Volcanoes buried our cities in fire. Diseases wiped out half our population in a single generation. Our own animals hunted us for food. And when nature was done trying to kill us, we tried to kill each other." He walked slowly toward the window. Outside, the stars burned in the endless black of space. For thousands of years, humans fought humans. Tribe against tribe. Nation against nation. We invented weapons that grew more powerful with each generation. Swords became guns. Guns became bombs. Bombs became weapons that could crack the world in half. He turned back to Thane. "We did not evolve to be strong, Commander. We evolved to refuse to die. No matter what the universe threw at us, we got back up. We adapted. We overcame. We survived." Thane was silent for a moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Among my people," he said, "we have a word for creatures like you. Spirits that refuse to stay dead. That rise again and again, no matter how many times they are struck down. We tell stories of them to frighten children." Jinho smiled slightly. "And what do your people do when they meet such spirits?" "We do not fight them," Thane replied. "We make peace with them. It is better to have such spirits as friends than as enemies." Jinho nodded slowly. Wise, Thane walked to the window and stood beside the human. They looked out at the stars together in silence. 2 warriors from different worlds, seeing the same endless darkness. "Sergeant Park," Thane said finally, "the footage you showed us, The response to the Titan 7 massacre? You said it ran for 3 hours. Yes. And you showed us perhaps 30 minutes. Correct. Thane's orange eyes glowed in the starlight. What happened in the rest? Gunho was quiet for a long moment. More of the same, he said. Searches. Recovery operations. Defensive positions. The fleet maintained its position at the Krell border for 6 weeks before the final agreement was signed. He paused. But there is one moment I did not show the class. Something that happened after the fleet arrived. Something I thought might be difficult for some species to understand. Thane turned to look at him. Show me. Jinho walked back to the display and inserted his data chip again. He scrolled through the footage until he found what he was looking for. The image showed the surface of Titan 7, 2 days after the attack. Marines had set up a temporary camp near the ruins of the colony. In the center of the camp, they had built something that made Thane lean forward with surprise. It was a memorial, a simple wall of stone with 400 names carved into it. Every human who had died in the attack. Marines stood in rows before the memorial, their heads bowed. Colonel Wusong stood at the front. His voice came through the recording clearly. We are here to remember those we lost, not as victims, not as casualties. As family, he looked at the names carved in the stone. Minjae, Yunji Yahun, Sora. We did not know all of you, but you were human. You were ours, and we will not forget you. The camera panned across the faces of the Marines. Some were crying. Some stared straight ahead with hard eyes. Some held hands. We've done what we came to do, Colonel Wusong continued. We have ended those who ended you. We have sent a message to the galaxy that your deaths will not go unanswered. But more than that, we have come to bring you home. He saluted the memorial. Rest now. Your family is here. We have you. The footage ended. Thane was silent for a very long time. I understand now, he said finally. The overkill. The massive response. It was not just about deterrence. No, Jinho agreed. It was about grief. About rage. About love for the dead. Jinho nodded. When humans lose family, we do not calculate proportional response. We do not think about efficiency. We think about justice. About making sure those we lost know they mattered. That their deaths meant something. He removed the data chip from the display. The Krell killed 400 of our people. In return, we sent thousands of soldiers, dozens of ships, and an entire fleet. Not because we needed to, but because those 400 people deserved to know that their entire species would rise up to avenge them. Thane made a sound deep in his chest. It might have been sadness. It might have been understanding, Sergeant Park, he said. Earlier today I said that overkill was the mark of a primitive species. I was wrong. He placed one of his 4 hands on Jinho's shoulder. The gesture was surprisingly gentle. Among the Velor, we believe that the measure of a people is how they treat their dead, how they honor those who have fallen. By that measure, humans are not primitive at all. He paused. They are perhaps the most devoted species I have ever encountered. Jinho looked up at the towering alien warrior. Commander, may I tell you one more thing about the Titan 7 response? Something I did not share with the class? Yes. Ginho took a breath. The footage I showed today, the first response, the second response, the fleet at the border. I called it the polite example. Thane's orange eyes narrowed. The polite example? Yes, because everything I showed was done by our military. Official forces following official orders. He met Thane's gaze steadily. The Krell got lucky. If civilians had found them first, before the Marines arrived, the response would have been very different, and much, much worse. Thane considered this for a long moment. I see, he said finally. He removed his hand from Jinho's shoulder and walked toward the exit. At the door, he stopped and turned back. Sergeant Park, I have taught warriors from 17 species. I have seen aggression. I have seen violence. I have seen the worst that intelligent beings can do to each other. He looked at the small human standing alone in the lecture hall. I never understood what it meant to be truly committed, Until today, he nodded once. Thank you for the lesson. Then he left. Ginho stood alone in the empty lecture hall. The stars burned outside the window, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, other species were looking at those same stars, planning, calculating, wondering. If humans were truly as dangerous as the rumors said, he put the data chip in his pocket and walked toward the door. Let them wonder, that was the point.